That is not what I expected to happen. Okay, there we go. That's better. Welcome back, everybody. I think we have a few to come. We lost a number in that break, but then it is getting towards tea time, so I expect there will be ebbs and flows throughout. So one of the things is it being very warm, washes dry really quickly. Oil-based washes, at least, which these, of course, are. So we can go ahead. I've got my Tamiya XF16. That's aluminium, which I'll be using shortly. And also some larger brushes to use with the wash. And also things to remove wash with. These are fantastic. These little makeup sponges. Let's see. I'll use my sexy goggles for this. Just use my glasses. But you can see this sort of stuff. So you can see it does stain very slightly surface. Not as much as if you'd used a matte acrylic or a matte finish in general. That's good because we do want to retain or increase some depth of texture. You can see the wash retains really well. So this is great for panel washing, this stuff. See how it's really pulled out, because this is exactly the same in these pieces, which you can barely see on camera, you know, only if I angle it. Whereas that's the whole point of a panel wash, right? Is to pull out those pieces. So these little foam makeup applicators are great for removing wash because they're very gentle. The chances of you breaking something or specifically getting rid of your paint are very low with these. Cotton buds can be much harder and can actually pull off the paint, scratch the paint specifically. Which, of course, is not ideal. That is not what you're trying to do. I mean, generally you're not trying to do that. So it's the simplest thing in the world to do this. You know, it's about as easy as modeling gets in terms of creating effects. Putting an oil wash on and then removing it with something like this. For larger areas like this, where these are a bit thick, you can use like these makeup pads. Obviously, the effect I wanted here is to darken down that one is still wet, so I'm not going to do that. But I wanted to darken down that zinc chromate. Is this one dry? No. It's not dry. I didn't expect it to be really. That one is pretty much dry. Again, just pulling down the zinc chromate a little bit, make it quite as bright. So where you do have like grooves and stuff, you want to be going perpendicular to those, because otherwise you will pull out the wash particles from there. Okay, I think that's all we're going to get in terms of those for the time being. Those are still wet. Those are still wet. That is still wet. Move all of those across. Those have yet to be done. Move those. And where's my tummy rest? There we go. Tamiya paints do tend to settle out. So again, a stirring ball is a good idea, or actually give them a physical stir, because look at that. They do really settle out. Obviously, if they're not mixed, they are not the paint the manufacturer intended. So don't complain about your paints, how you're not getting the opacity or whatever it is, if you haven't mixed them properly. Because until they are mixed homogeneously, they aren't the paint. Right? They are a settled mixture. So it's mixed. Give it a good shake. Now we have Tamiya XF16. And now we can actually paint. See, and that covers very nicely. I'm not having to fight against a darker colour. Also, if we miss any areas, it's not going to be as visible. I keep moving the fuselage in odd ways. It's because the cable for this camera keeps catching. thing I've had with Tamiya paint is a couple of things. You need to keep your brush loaded because it will obviously dry out. You don't want it to dry out. As soon as it dries out, you just got a dry paintbrush. You don't want to keep going back over the same area until it's completely dry. Once it's dry, it's absolutely fine. It's that intermediate stage, that sort of skinning stage that I mentioned before, that's problematic. Here's some nice flat aluminium instead of the grey. We're also going to do that to this little console at the top here. Of course, now I do need my sexy gogs back. I'm not just taking off wash, I'm actually trying to do something of some delicacy. Okay, I made a bit of a mess just here, but that'll be okay. It'll work out. One of the things I think is that these carriers are silver. I believe. At least from this photos we saw before. Once they're washed, I know I've done those pretty roughly. Once they're washed, I don't think there'll be too much. That's actually an issue with those. Okay, the other side. I think we've done those. Back to this beastie. I'm just going to layer on some yellow on this now. Okay. Right, let's put all of that to one side a second. So try now. Pretty much. It's just so obviously a larger brush makes it much easier to apply wash over bigger areas. Which is what I'm going to do here. I do want to get this kind of everywhere because I do want a bit of discoloration, bit of staining everywhere. But the other thing is, when going over everywhere like this, you kind of get the white spirit on, that lowers the surface tension. Then if you do want to go back to any areas and put in extra, it will flow along those lines a bit more. So you can add emphasis if you so wish. Right, so that. Okay. Okay, lots more wash in there. It's a whole gunky mess. Still need to do that little bit of work on there. Okay. Right, all of that done. I think that takes us through all of that. See, this is where the advantage of living in a thatch cottage comes in, that it is now exactly the same or slightly cooler temperature than it was earlier in the day. So it takes a lot. This cottage has really thick walls, so the thermal capacity of the house is really big, which of course means that it takes a long time to heat up. Disadvantage of that is when it does heat up, it takes a really, and then the temperature changes and goes cooler and everybody else is cooling off, it is still hot here because it takes a lot longer to come back. But fortunately, I do have some salted caramel ice cream. Keep me cool. Keep my sugar up. As if I needed an excuse. There's a similar thing here on this fire extinguisher. But I did it on the yellow seat. And then I am actually going to use this middle stone. Kind of base. I'm trying to get it on the side. And then I can't remember what that one was supposed to be. What was that? N. Oh, I think N is just the. And yeah, the olive green. So we don't need to worry about that one. That's good. So what I'm going to do next on this. So this does dry very quickly, the ICM paint. Not as quickly as a lacquer, but it is pretty good. Go over this orange. And then when that is dry, I'm going to go over that with this clear red. Yeah, I know what you mean, Mark. It's like a thunderstorm clears the air. Gets rid of all those positive ions. averted disaster. So I keep realizing I'm painting too far down for you guys to see. There we go. Nice red fire extinguisher. For all that you're likely to see of it. It's still wet. It's still wet. Well, it might be dry. Are these? Indeed, I think we'll use the small one of these. The only thing with these little makeup brushes is they do degrade with white spirit or odorless thinners. So you do get through them. But, you know, that's what they're for, right? They cost almost nothing. Oh, good grief. Hey, hey, Pablo, stop. Oh, just a mad dog. Now, of course, you do want to remove more of the... Pablo, stop it. You do want to remove more of, you know, any of the staining here. You can just use some white spirit on these or on a cotton bud, and it will take off a lot more. I'm quite happy with how that is. Clear the Bombay doors. I think we've probably got the use out of that one. You can actually use in conjunction with a little sponge, because you can take off a lot with the sponge, and then come back in with the little bobbly one. Where you've got a bit more control, a bit more precision. So, These do come off as well. Just be careful of that. What was G? Not what G was for the top of that. G is oily steel. Oily steel. I think we have the oily steel here. Maybe not. Maybe I don't. What was the oily steel number again? Oily steel is M26. See if I have 1026 here. 1024. No. 1027. 1028. 1026. Oily steel. There we go. Not that I think you're going to be able to see that, but hey, we know it's there. Right. Still a bit wet on that one. Still a bit wet on that one. Let's move all of those well out of the way. Everything here. Clear the decks a little bit. Because I think what we'll do, bring in all of these pieces that we want spraying black. I think I've only got 3 of these here now with me, so we'll have to take this in turns. But that's okay. We don't mind taking in turns, do we? And no, I'm not going to do any of that. I think, though, we can look at the other control column. I think also this machine gun, which I believe is the 4-nose machine gun. God, Americans were keen on putting Brownings everywhere. So this one is the captain's. We'll do that one first because that distinguishes it from this one. Although they are different directions, you never know. Could screw up. Big enough to get those wrong. Always accept that possibility. Then we need second control, yoke piece. Well, I mean, it was also the kind of philosophy around the B-17, right? Which was, as I've said before, not actually a very good bomber. The Liberator was a far better machine. And has received much less in terms of accolades, really. I mean, the B-17 carried, what, 10 machine guns? 10 50 cals? That weighed a lot. It needed 10 crew members. In fact, I think it might have been more than 10. You needed 10 crew members, because you've got all these bloody machine guns that need operating. And guess what? That affected its range, its speed, and overall performance. So when you sacrifice a bomber's main raison d'etre for things that it's not actually supposed to do, I was surprised it's not very good. Okay. Yeah, I mean, the Lee Grant, I mean, again, you have that 1930s philosophy of tank making, like early 30s, where more turrets was good. I mean, look at some of the, was it the T-28, the Russian monstrosity that had like 7 or 5 turrets or something? It's like, no, it's like more turrets does not make it better. I mean, it's counterintuitive in a way, but people weigh physical amounts and you get them a split between, who's doing what. Tank commander can only look in so many places at once. The whole logistics things become which is really how we won World War II, right? It was logistics. Logistics and GDP. And quite simply put, the Germans didn't have enough stuff, either people, weapons, oil, munitions, anything to win, compared to the two largest nations on Earth, the US and the Soviet Union. Doesn't matter, whether you think the average German tank was better than the average Russian or American tank or not, it's kind of moot when you've got 20 times as many. It can be shocking by comparison. Unless your kill ratio on the other side is more than that 20, you are going to lose. It's just a numbers game. If you have all the best stuff in the world and you don't have gas to make it move, doesn't matter. You're going to lose. So it always amuses me, this debate you get about German stuff being superior. In some cases it was. In other cases it was horribly over-engineered. But it's the same arguments I hear about, like, for instance, the Su-57, the Russian stealth fighter. People talk about how good it is, typically Russian trolls, right? But say, oh, it's this, it's that, it's the other. It's just like, it's debatable whether it has as good a stealth as an F-35 or an F-22. But even if you take the premise that it is, right? Even if you take the premise it's better, Russia simply doesn't have the ability to make many. I think there's something like 20 odd in service now. The Americans phasing out its F-22s. They're effectively obsolete, and it has like 150 of them or something. Not many, but it is literally getting hundreds and hundreds of F-35s. Yeah, I mean, you also saw this design philosophy. You also saw this design philosophy at the end of World War II as well. Because if you look at, we made, as the British, we made some pretty dodgy tanks in World War II. We had some which were good, some which were okay, and some which were very, very bad. We had a bit of a mixed record, I think it's fair to say. Post-war, we made some of the best tanks in the world. Not to say that we did that straight off, because to start with, we had things like the Conqueror, which was a good tank that was built for a different age because it was just too heavy. The lesson of World War II, watching the Germans, should have been, actually, mobility is super important. You know, all of these super heavy tanks like the Jagdpanzer, Jagdpanzer, Jagdpanther, Jagdtiger. The Jagdtiger was unassailable on the front. Not a single Allied gun could knock the thing out from the front. Just didn't. We didn't have the capacity. We didn't have the armor penetrating rounds and guns able to fire them at sufficient velocity to hit it and knock it out from the front. But guess what? It didn't matter because things we used basically as bunkers. We just went around the side and shot through the wheels. It's like mobility was more important. You know, like the ridiculous concept of the ratter. You know, it's ludicrous. You know, and we experimented with that, came up with some stuff, and it was just like, no, you know what? This is garbage. And then we got stuff like the Chieftain, you know, in the 50s and 60s, which is a fantastic tank. You know, the whole concept of the main battle tank rather than heavy tanks, light tanks, medium tanks. You know, why does everybody, almost everybody at least, have tanks of roughly the same kind of capabilities, use 120mm guns, you know, because they balance all of the various factors. As with everything, if you fail to learn from your mistakes, you're doomed to repeat them. Yeah, I mean, look at what we made at the beginning of the war. You know, like the whole concept of the infantry tank and the cavalry tank, effectively the fast cruiser tank. You know, we had tanks like the A9 and stuff, which were not great. You know, but then we had the Matilda, that's actually surprisingly good. For its time. Getting pretty outdated pretty quickly. Yeah, but by the end of the war, we were making tanks like the Cromwell. Just not bad at all. Okie dokie, you've got all those black bits there. The Bob Semple tank. I think tank is stretching it really as a description for that, to be honest. Alrighty, that is all of that black stuff there. Good old Centurion, yeah. And then the Chieftain that followed it. It's also a very good tank. I mean, look at the... I mean, Soviet tanks were always... Not always. You know, from sort of the T-34 forward, Russian tanks are pretty good. You know, they had their moments when they produced some nasty crap, as everybody did. But you know, they certainly adopted the idea of, you know, a kind of one size fits all post-war with like the T-55, the T-62. I mean, incredibly successful tanks. You know, small rounded turret to provide good all-round deflection, mobile, you know, big gun capable of firing HE and armor piercing. And they were used all over the place. You know, that kind of fueled the Soviet Union's exports for a long time. I mean, we're seeing some of them still being used in Ukraine. You know, really up until the T-72, the T-80 really never got, I think, any use outside of the old Warsaw Pact. I don't believe, not widespread use, you know, in the way that the T-55, 62, 72 did. Yeah, so I could start to spray other bits black, but I kind of don't want to just now. I think I shall come back to all of this stuff when I've constructed a bit more. We need to crack on. So let's pull this back. Oh, is that right? I'm going to try and get to Tank Fest this year. I've never actually been to Tank Fest. I meant to go last year. I didn't manage it somehow with other stuff happening. The IS3, JS3, whichever you want to call it. It's quite something. Oh, bear with me, my girlfriend is calling me. Well, that was we planned to have Chinese tonight and or Subway. And she's gone to see her friend in Andover. Usually when she comes back, she does that. And she, the roadworks where she was going to get that from, so she can't get to that place. She's got herself completely lost. She's like, what should I do? She's like, should I go to Domino's and bring that back? It's like, yeah, that's good. Go to Domino's. Yeah, I'm kind of ticking off some stuff that I, really wanted to see. Never thought I would. One being the ME-262 flying at RAIT React last year. I never thought I'd see a 262 of any sort, replica or otherwise, fly. I'd like to see Tiger 131 running, obviously. That is a very kind offer. And when do you have to know, Taggers? What is the last day you can cancel? Right. So the first thing here, if bring this decal on, is the magic pledge. Nice. Yeah, do let me know, and I'll have to check my schedule and available money, etc. Okay, so some of these other pieces are dry enough to wipe off. So you can see it's just darkened down, and any sort of like overall like wash or filter or anything is going to like blend together up a little bit to make it a little bit more uniform. Meanwhile, while that has dried, we want to actually stick more gunk on ones that haven't got it. So we should do that. Now we have an opportunity. That one. This one. Didn't work as propped up at all, did it? Pablo. Was almost ready. All right, okay. So I shall let you know, taggers. I won't leave it until the 27th. Sorry, the 23rd. I shall let you know as soon as possible. But leave it with me, and I shall do some checkage. You can see it just doing the same thing here, removing the excess for these things. The only thing to be careful of, obviously, with anything like this is these pieces. You don't end up ripping them off by getting any piece of sponge caught and then applying too much force. Again, just building up that kind of shadow. As I say, if you find the transitions are too stark for you, too much staining or whatever it is, you can use a little bit of white spirit, and that'll help take it off. Obviously, once you're doing this, you need to make sure you've got a color fast and solvent fast base on which to go with. So you wouldn't do this if you were using enamels. Yeah, you would use a water-based wash in that case. So you want to use a wash that the solvent doesn't affect whatever the base coat is underneath it. That's the main thing. And people say, can you use X or Y over either acrylics or enamels or whatever? And the answer is always yes, you can, provided whatever your solvent is does not interact with the layer below. That's the only miscompatibility issue, if you like. So you wouldn't use a lacquer, a heavy lacquer, like something that is going to wet the model over basically any type of finish, because lacquer solvents will eat through anything. Now it's fine to use a lacquer if you just got a varnish, like a rattle can. Rattle cans are nitrocellulose based, very aggressive solvent, but they hit the model and then they dry. You shouldn't be putting them on, so it builds up a big thick wet layer, and then moves them about. Those are the things that tend to destroy finishes. So hopefully you can see there, and if in doubt, of course, test on something that doesn't matter, a piece of spare plastic card or something. Just try the two. So you can see we've still retained the shading that we had before. We've just deepened all of the shadows in all of the the crevices. just to give that illusion of shadow and depth. Not that you can't have the depth there. Obviously, we got quite a lot of depth detail, in these, but it's creating that illusion of shadow. Does that represent, the way that light interacts with the object? That's what we're trying to simulate. So we did not name our dog. Pablo is a rescue. We've had him for 3 years now, I think it is. Yeah, I think it's 3 years. We think, we don't have much because there wasn't much in the way of records that came with him. We think he was about 7 years old when we got him. One of the reasons that we got him, well, there are several reasons, obviously. We wanted a dog. My ex has always had dogs. She was feeling very sad with COVID. So I thought, well, I'll get a dog. Now, I'm allergic to to dog dander, as it's known. So, hair and stuff. So I'm limited in what we could have, in the house and actually, live a normal life. So we had to go with breeds which either are double coated. So with my ex, we used to have a Chonza, which is a mix between a Bichon Frise and a Schnauzer. They are double coated and have hair. Double coated, like a wiry, not wiry, it's almost like a soft kind of undercoat, and then this wiry, very thick, curly outer. They don't shed. And they're called hypoallergenic dogs, but they're not really. There's no such thing as a hypoallergenic dog, really. It's just how you react to things. And generally things like poodles, things that are double coated, things that don't have fur. And of course, he doesn't have fur. He has a bit of hair, but that's it. Generally produce less reaction. So I have no reactions to Pablo at all, other than his general demeanor, barking, and general silliness. So we wanted a rescue because I think there are so many rescues, dogs that deserve a home, deserve some chance of happiness. Most puppy breeders are fairly evil. So, we weren't going to pay for a thoroughbred puppy. Neither of us are that sort of person. And so we were limited in what we could have. So we joined various Facebook groups. This was during COVID that we were looking originally. It was a really difficult time because there were loads of rescue dogs, because people decided to get a dog for COVID and they decided they couldn't cope with it, and then they gave it away, and homes were flooded, but they didn't have enough staff to get them allocated and things, all these sorts of things. And one of the groups we were a member of is the Chinese Crested Rescue Society. We also had, remember the Zolo, which is like a Mexican hairless dog. Society and all these other ones, and Pablo came up. He just happened to be, on their site. We went through the vetting process because obviously they have, you have to go through all of that. So we had to wait till there was somebody available because it was COVID. It was difficult to arrange and everything took ages. We eventually got through that. We got the list and the letter, and he came up and he was there looking at the camera, tongue hanging out of his mouth to one side. And we're just like, oh, look at him. That silly looking dog. That's kind of the dog we'll probably end up with. We looked at his name and it was Pablo. And my girlfriend is Spanish or Catalan. So it's just like, well, it's obviously, fated to be that we should have this ridiculous looking hairless creature named Pablo. So we don't believe in changing a dog's name, because dogs get used to they don't obviously understand names, but they understand the sounds that are associated with calling them and everything. So that is how we ended up with Pablo, the rather ridiculous Chinese crested with a very, very big voice. And definitely not a rude question. It's perfectly valid. Okay, let's get some of this off. See how this is like all of these little bits, or little bits of foam that sort of broken off with the solvent and whatever. So that is pretty overdone, right? But it is going to be at the top of the Bombay, where if you were looking in from underneath, would actually be pretty much, these ridges would be very much in shadow. The whole thing would be very much in shadow. So the fact that this is quite dark, I don't mind because of that. Yeah. So again, everything in context. If this was sort of on the top of the aircraft, then this wouldn't be suitable for me. Yeah. So context is very important, I think, when doing these things. That's probably had it now. So kind of the direction and movement you apply, so affects how much of the pigment, let's call it the pigment, from the wash remains and where. So you've seen there was quite a bit in these pieces here, and I kind of went in more at an angle and wiped them out, because yes, it's appropriate to have the shadows like built up around those edges, but not in the middle. So that's why these are quite good, because they do allow you to get in, if you want, a more discrete shadow effect rather than a wider one. Allows you to get in and get that pigment out rather than just leaving it having an effect you don't want. But that is pretty much what I want there. So we've got quite deep shadows, deep pigmentation around here, which is simulating the amount of light getting there, or that your eye would see, so it looks like it's in shadow. That's the principle of it, right? That's why we do these washes, in an effort to create that in an easy and quick manner, because obviously you could paint that, a miniature painters would. Yeah, they would painstakingly spend the time to layer and, you know, increase through the shades to create that same effect. Obviously on a miniature figure, not a console, but for us, slapping a bit of oil wash on and wiping it off is much better use of time. Okay. Well, we're starting to progress. I know we've done a lot of sort of faffing about a bit here, but I think it's been necessary for us to get to where we are now, which I think, whilst we're waiting for the main fuselage pieces to dry, because those washes are still very much in progress. Thank you, taggers. That's much appreciated. Our first dog was in kennels until we took was in kennels. My teeth in was in kennels until we took age 2, as no one wanted to. You see, that kind of is a rescue dog, right? It's a dog that no one would take. You know, not their fault they had cataracts. So it's the same principle, right? And I don't, you know, I have no issues with people that get, you know, dogs from being a puppy. I absolutely understand why you would. You know, as I say, when my ex and I got a dog, it was her dog. She got it with money that came from when her grandmother died. So that inheritance she wanted to use in that way to get a dog. And we agreed, you know, with the children and everything. But we wanted to get a puppy there because we had young children, and you can't ever really tell what a rescue dog has been through or how it's going to react. So, you know, we got a thoroughbred puppy, and, you know, we went through a lot to find a breeder that was reputable, you know, all those things. To get the dog. But I think when you're able to take a rescue dog, you have that capacity, you know, if you're just a couple of adults with no other concerns, then I think it's just a normal thing to do. So I certainly don't begrudge anybody that goes the puppy route. In the same way that, you know, I'm a vegetarian. I've only been a vegetarian for, what, 5 years? I love meat. I love steak, for instance. You know, it isn't a matter of not liking it or wanting everybody to not eat meat. You know, we are evolved as hunter-gatherers. You know, we should eat meat. I still eat fish. I certainly don't begrudge anybody that eats meat. But for me, there's a couple of things. One was a provenance thing. So, like, with all the horse meat thing, I actually worked in a company that we had a health. So we were a diagnostics company, right? But we had a division which was animal health. We worked a lot with vets and companies, you know, farms, all that kind of thing. And we did genetic testing. So a lot of the stuff we did with farms in animal health was genetic testing for diseases and stuff, you know. But obviously with the horse meat in, you know, cheap crap pre-prepared food scandal, it became about provenance, about testing the meat to see whether it was really what it said it was, kind of thing. And at the time, not that we ate a lot of, you know, we didn't tend to eat crap meat, if that makes sense, you know, like pre-prepared stuff. But just the being brought to light how shit these companies were making these things, and generally how poorly our food is sourced. And you are what you eat. You are literally what you eat. You know, your body breaks down what you eat, and it makes it into new cells, which are you. And I was like, yeah, I don't really want. I would rather know where that material comes from. That's going to become part of me, right? I don't want it to be fed, recycled corpses of its brothers and stuff. So I have no problem eating, like wild caught venison or something like that, that's been shot on a Scottish Highland or something. I mean, it's expensive to do that, right? And I don't have the money to do that more than maybe once a year. But if that is going to become part of me, I don't want it to have been like McDonald's used to do with meat, mechanically recovered meat, So it was a provenance thing. I want to know what I'm putting in my body. It's easier to do that with plant material than it is with animals. Partially because animals live longer, so and then part of that as well was sort of animal welfare, because once you learn, what those companies do, and it usually is big companies, right, trying to maximize profitability. Once you realize what they're doing to create the cheapest meat possible so they can get the maximum profit, you realize how bad some of these they're called farms, but they're not really. Processing centers is probably more realistic. So, but for me, that was a personal choice. So I know many people don't choose that, and that's their choice. Everybody has the same facts available to them. They can do the same searching of their stuff. I think as long as you're aware. The bad thing is when you're not aware, right? When you're eating horse meat, when you think it's beef that's been raised in a green field, you realise it's a horse that's in some knacker's yard in some foreign country. That's a problem, It's one of the things I say about modelling a lot, is that it's all about your personal choice, your journey through the hobby. I'm happy to come on and on a stream like this and show how I do things, do it in silly challenges or whatever, show what's possible, people are capable of, call companies out on their bullshit when they package a 70-year-old kit as new. But that's the important thing, right? You need to know. And just saying caveat emptor isn't good enough. I think a company has a responsibility. But if you then choose to buy that 70-year-old kit knowing that's more power to you. I, for one, am not going to deride you. That's the wrong side. No, it's not. It was the right side. Yeah, it's just that it kind of slots in like so. Nice. All right. I now realise that actually I should have painted all of that. Bugger. There we go. A mild profanity. Ah, like Father Ted. These wings are a very precise fit, but they are best done in sections. So, you know how you get some kits with the wings, they give Tamiya kits, and especially you kind of get them and you just put them together and they just hold together by themselves. And then you just have to kind of go along and run your cement all the way through, and you're all good. These are not like that. Not that they don't fit, because they absolutely do. It's just these are actually quite. One of the things I found in ICM kits in general, it's not that the parts are thin, but they are commendably, sized. They're not over thick. So for a piece like this, it is what, a millimeter thick, this plastic, which for a piece which is that long, is, let's say, relatively thin, compared to a lot of kits, which does give you some flexibility, across that entire thing, which means because you've got these very delicate locating pins, which are less than a millimeter, you can see here you've got this piece at the front, which goes in with a piece which is, again, 0.2 of a millimeter, maybe, in terms of thickness. You can't do that for the whole wing and expect it to be, robustly just staying together once you do it. So going and actually making sure all of these bits, fit piece by piece, and then it's very strong when it's together, but like a real aircraft, until you kind of get that structure kind of bound together, it's tricky, I would say. Which, again, I don't want to give the impression that I'm saying it's a tricky build. It's just you need to take your time with it, I think, is probably the best way of describing it. It's not just a wham bam, thank you, ma'am. I've got the wing together. You can see it's coming together really nicely, but I am having to kind of go step by step. I guess it depends what kind of a build you're looking for and enjoy. I haven't felt at any point this kit is fighting me, but I also do feel I am modeling rather than just, some engineer has done all the work for me, and all I have to do is sort of shake the box and it falls together. And I quite like that kind of compromise, between those two extremes. Well, no, a kit that fights you isn't necessarily an extreme. It can still go together well. It just has, tricky elements or awkward fit or whatever. And this doesn't really have that. It has some complex pieces. The way it's done has some pieces which aren't immediately obvious, like these pieces. But once you work them out, again, did take looking at that video last night, to do it. But once you worked out exactly how they fit together, it fits together absolutely perfectly. So I mean, yeah, this is quite a complex like bit of how it goes together, but it fits perfectly if I don't knock it halfway. You know, if I look at that union, this piece here, you know, that's a really good fit. I just wish I'd painted back there. God damn it. So as I did yesterday, this is kind of a quick and dirty way of reducing, not removing, but reducing a injection mark. Enough so that it won't really show once it's painted. I mean, obviously it's going to be underneath, so unless you actually pick it up, you're not going to see it at all, but I get where I'm coming from, right? Okay. It's still a little wet. This is now dry. Sometimes you'll find you get areas where you actually do want to go behind, get rid of some stuff, and then you can just use a brush. There we go. Like that. It's a humbrol brush. Me? So this can simultaneously be one of the best or one of the dullest parts of modeling, depending on how much there is to do. And if you're able to space it out, then you never spend too much time doing this altogether. Sometimes it's just like I just wish it would end. That's not bad though. I think that's got a reasonable finish to it. I can see that was actually quite wet when I moved it out because I wasn't really bothered about taking everything off the seat at the bottom there, the actual where the pilot not the pilot, the gunner is sitting. Because this is more about getting it into those crevices, for the shadows or accumulated dirt as well. They're in those pieces. Not really about what's down at the bottom, because in here, and that is attached there. You don't see much of that anyway. Okay, I've waited long enough for this. think I'm probably exhausted now. Thank you, Steve. I appreciate the sentiment. If you guys can like the video or the stream or the video posted thereafter, that would be fantastic. Okay. So the other thing you can do with these kind of things, of course, is, you know, have a first go at it, especially if it hasn't fully dried and you kind of want to accelerate things on a bit, is you do a first like rough pass and then leave it. It will dry further and then you can go back to it. Way too wet. So, you know, here is the other one. If we decide we want to brighten this up a bit, you see, you can still get quite a bit off. That's not far off. Sometimes it's worth removing any excess spirit just to, again, help it along the way. You know what? I think I'm actually going to use this just to too much there, because there's a lot of quite delicate stuff here. So here on seat, see where I said about, you know, the wash will help to like define those edges and hide any like slightly incomplete painting there. That's what I meant. Not a reason just to be slapdash, of course, even though I use it as exactly that reason. I hope I can kind of show that this is, it's a fairly subtle technique. We haven't done anything major here. We're just like accentuating these lines and the areas under things, just to again emphasize what we've already done with the airbrush, that creating that emphasis of where is the light falling, where are the shadows falling, creating a bit of visual interest in terms of the texture of different areas of green, not just like a flat base. Okay, that is a bit too much to go for. Remove some from the edge just to help it dry a little. Ooh, right. How are our fuselage pieces getting on? They're not far off there. And the other one, yeah, we're pretty much there. So when I'm wiping this stuff off, I'm trying to go in a direction that either light will fall if it's an internal surface, along that line, or if it's an external surface, I'm trying to go in the way of either an aircraft airflow, or where if it's standing on the ground, gravity would naturally pull things. So if you do get streaking and stuff, it's all going in the right direction, like. I actually need to go get some more of these. Hopefully you can see that this is also toning down the level of contrast created with the airbrush. In terms of between those different areas, and it's focusing the contrast now on those shadow areas. So you're making the transitions for the colors seem smoother, while simultaneously kind of giving you more contrast, boosting that contrast in those perceived shadow areas. Again, this is all smoke and mirrors, right? This is all. So what I'm doing with the brush in these sorts of areas is kind of trying to diffuse where it's got like very harsh stuff where I can't get behind something, where I don't want a harsh shadow. I'm just using the brush to sort of smoosh it around a bit so it diffuses that effect out a little bit, so it doesn't look quite as harsh and unnatural. But hopefully you can see here, remember where I didn't paint into these areas, and I said the wash would take it up, and here we go, the wash has taken that up. So washes are great because they can do a lot of heavy lifting for you. Again, airbrushing is also great because it can do a lot of heavy lifting for you. The two in combination can really do a lot. But all of this without a single bit of dry brushing. Wow, it's degrading this there. Oh, little bits of foam I have here. Need one of those little desk hoovers. I don't really want to do anything just there. Still a little bit too wet, really. Okay, so I did those. Did those. Did all of those. Okay. Bit of a random question. Here we go. We know you have your issues with FX, including the ME410. Is there any major difference between marquee new releases and, say, a starter set when ordering for the shop? What do you mean by marquee new releases? You mean like the B-24? Let me know and I'll answer. B-24 build action, etc. Okay, there isn't any, none at all. So they're just, as far as FX are concerned, they're product. So there's no difference between me ordering like 10 starter boxes or 2 liberators, for instance. You know, if it's the same value, it's the same value. Whether they would allocate stock to me if I ordered, you know, a lot, I don't know. I don't think there's any difference there either. I think it mainly goes to, you know, what is your order value, and what can they supply. It's a very just straight business transaction, you know. So I'm just trying to look at what the best next step is here. Yeah, I have one of those little inspection cameras as well. I used it to trace all the electrical stuff in our house because we had no idea what was connected to what. And sometimes there'd be like a like a wall switch with 4 light switches on it, and like 3 of them would connect to something, but you couldn't tell what they connected to. So we changed bulbs and stuff, and like found, okay, this one goes to the outside one, this one does this one does the other, this one we don't know. And we did, like for the kitchen, we couldn't find where the transformers were for the LED lights. So we want to change the LED lights. Sorry, the lights, because there were 50 watt. I had 6 50-watt little, I think they're GU16 or GU11 downlighters, which is a lot, like 300 watts of power burning, which is what the 80s did. But you can replace those with like 7-watt LEDs. Thing is, with a lot of old-fashioned transformers aren't suitable for LEDs. They like create flickering, and then they cause them to fail more often. So we were trying to make sure that they were okay. We couldn't find the damn transformers. It took us forever. So the inspection camera was super useful for that. Academy playing kits offer better value as starter kits. They're simple to build and cheap, but also more to choose from. Do you know Academy? I've always thought have been pretty good value, but then actually a lot of Italieri kits are also pretty good value. It really depends on the individual kit, because there are some dog kits in both of those ranges, and there are some which are really good. I think the advantage of the Airfix starter set range is they are specifically starter sets. You know, they are designed specifically for new or returning modelers to build easily. The issue I have is some of their choices, you know, like the P51D didn't make any sense at all to me. If you look at that compared to so they're doing a 109, right? But the 109 they're doing is the F. They don't have a 1/72nd scale 109F. So that's great because they're expanding an existing range. So that gives a reason for existing modelers, because generally the detail on starter kits is still pretty good. It's good enough, especially in 1/72nd scale, for you to want to do that. The P51 offers nothing, absolutely no advantages whatsoever. In fact, disadvantages to existing modelers. But let's face it, if somebody's done a P51, they could do another P51, but it has to be bringing something to the table, right? And just being super easy to build for an existing modeler, I don't think is enough. So I think they've really limited the potential of that kit, if you see what I mean, as opposed to the 109F that they'll be releasing, which has a much wider potential, right? Purely because it is an addition to the range, not a competition to an existing kit in the range. That has nothing to do with models. That is just like common sense business stuff. Right? But I digress. Okay. Still need to drill the holes. So I need to get my wow stick at one point. But we've done all of this. I think, why don't I do all of the flaps? That's an easy thing to do. They require no painting. We can get all of those out of the way. So E19, what's this piece? E19. Shift that over there, let that dry a bit more. Oh, at F34. Why go E and then, okay. C19, C20. Easy enough to distinguish those. That is the Bombay, closed Bombay I'm not going to be using, so let's cut that out and get rid of it. These are the Bombay doors that I am using, but let's cut off these little nubs. Get rid of the nubs. Nubs gone. Oh, wait a minute, it's two. Huh? Okay, I'll come back to that. More nubs. More nubs. We also have, those are all Fs as well. Those are the only E pieces on here. E4 and E17. Okay, E4. And E17. So I take it you mean is that the 1/72nd or the 1/48 scale, Mario? I mean, it could be both, right? .148. Okay. So the Tamiya 1/48 scale 109s are not perfect, but they are very good. And they're not very much money because of their policy of, selling older tools at cheaper prices. Okay, these are the other side of these. Flaps, and they have big chunky flaps as well. Are they flaps or slats? I think they're still flaps if they move in one piece like that rather than just being a drop down, right? Don't think that changes how they're referred to. So many of these little bobbly bits. So many. Oh, there's a machine gun there. I wonder if that's also for the front. It's just a different version. I wonder which one we have got. Probably this is the one we need because I haven't painted it. Right. It's usually the way. I have one slide there. I think I can just cut all these off because I think they only go one way. So I don't think there's any detriment into just cutting them all off. Going from there. There's not an awful lot left on sprue F either. We've covered most of this. That is the co-pilot seat that I forgot to paint. So we have, again, quite chunky ailerons as well. But some nice subtle fabric effect on these. It does give the effect of fabric over a metal frame. Well, I messed up there, but I got away with it. That is quite a high rate of purchase, Mario. 150 kits in 4 months. I think I've done higher, but mainly because at one time I was buying a lot of stuff on eBay. I'm thinking of to early noughties, right? Including, like, I bought an entire collection of 1/72 scale Russian subjects. World War II, Cold War. I think there was over 100 in that one purchase. You know. Now, I just think I may have heard my girlfriend pulling up. And we are getting, this is kind of the middle one of the three in terms of the stream for today. And I think the shortest one. I think most people have been eating, doing other bits and bobs. So I will probably... Yeah.
Motion detected at the front door.
There we go. I will probably sign off very shortly to eat Domino's. Pizza, that is, not actual Domino's, which are not as tasty by some way. And I'll need to do that because otherwise Pablo will end up stealing my pizza.
Motion detected at the front door.
Be careful what you ask for, Mario. I'm still going through that divorce process. I separated in 2018. So still haven't got the financial bit sorted. It's been very tortuous. And I will do a little jig when it is all said and done, because I'm sick of it, quite frankly. But we are getting in to the thick of things So I think now we are pretty much halfway through. Right, we've got got 2 4-hour sessions and 1 3-hour session to go. So slightly over halfway actually, which is a bit scary, given that I don't think I am over halfway through this build. Hopefully it comes together quite quickly at the end. I mean, I know I'm doing it out of the box, but I don't want to throw it together with, no semblance of what I would normally do. I wanted to do it as I normally do an out of the box build, more or less, a little bit less, but and certainly a little bit faster. I would normally, of course, leave most of these sections, like the wash parts. Typically, I leave overnight. Come back to the next day. I wouldn't say I'm a fast builder by any stretch of the imagination. Unless I'm doing a 1-hour challenge, of course. But a 24-hour marathon is a bit different. Got to pace yourself. Oh, Mario, don't tempt me. That was silly, Alex. I hope I didn't. No, I didn't. Oh, God, thank God for that. Take that away. That would have been bad if that had leaked into the body of the cell there. That would have been very bad. Okay, but we have a whole bunch of flaps. Some ailerons. Ailerons. I've got some little bits to do here. Mostly ICM kits have fixed positions for all this stuff. I'm not sure. I don't think Marauders flaps and stuff like drooped and things when it was doing, but anywho, I shall now break for pizza. I'm gonna come down.
Oh.
Yeah.
You're going down?
Yeah.
Okay.
Marina just bought me up some pizza, which is very kind, but I'm going to actually go and spend a short break with her and be back at 9 o'clock for the next and final stint today on this build, and see if we can leap ahead a little bit, because we need to get kind of all of this done, and I think really the fuselage putting together. So I shall love you and leave you, and hopefully see you again in half an hour's time. Okay, thanks guys.